but began to restructure so that it was in fact much more efficient, and it replaced old military equipment with new military equipment. None of this was ever reported on the BBC, and I came to the conclusion very early on that I was watching propaganda by the BBC to mislead people. I don't know how many of you would know, but at the moment there are major pacts set up between Germany and Russia to do with the development of military industrial capability. These are things never reported to us, and they need to be. I'm jumping around, and I'm doing it deliberately because I want to just try and get you thinking. And many of you have seen this slide before. It always works. This is artwork that popped up in Basingstoke. And the local, well, sorry, that was probably a bit of a pun. But the local children worked it out because they called it the Wicked Willy. Now, if you go round towns and urban areas, you will see very strange artwork appearing. A lot of it can be rusty, jagged metal. You look at it, there's nothing of beauty in it. But what it actually does is starts to play on your mind. If we ask who funded the artwork, nobody wants to tell you. So overall, throughout the country, you look out and you will start to see totem poles, metal trees, jagged pieces of sculpture that have come out of nowhere. Now, I'm going to suggest to you this is not an accident, somebody's planned this. This is an interesting bit of paper because it tells the story of some people who were refurbishing a house over a number of years, and the weekend before they were due to occupy the house, it was occupied by Romanian squatters. And of course the Mail has blasted this out to us because it wants to do something with your mind. It wants to make you sympathetic for this poor family, and it wants to make you aggressive and angry at the Romanian squatters. But the government provided the means by which the people, the Romanians, came in the first place. So what is happening in the country when we look at the new population is not their fault, because the government opened the doors and invited them in. And I'm a very suspicious man, and when I start to look at what's happening, I get the impression that we are being gently played with to create antagonism between groups. And there's a reason for that. I'll come back to it. Sorry. This one, very clear. We've now got snoopers' armies appearing. So we're living in British society where local authorities are putting snoopers out to see whether we fill our bins correctly, to see how many people are living in the house, to see whether we send our children to the right schools.
Does that come on at the top there?
I'll come on to that, sir. Now, if we say, what sort of society runs a society with snoopers, the one that comes into my mind very easily is East Germany. Because under the Stasi system in East Germany, a terrible regime existed where people were suspicious of members of their own family in case they were paid Stasi snoopers. And we now see exactly the same philosophy being grown in this country, slowly, step at a time, slowly creeping in. And then it's announced in the paper as if it's factual and you've all approved it. This may be a little bit dark, so I'll read some of it. This is today's newspapers that we've been reading coming up here. But our air sea rescue services are to be sold off to the French. So we are now putting defence of our coastal areas, rescue of our citizens at sea in the hands of a foreign country, France. There's not enough capacity in the military hospitals. Well, this is hardly surprising because in the 1980s the government shut down all of the military hospitals, so there was no capability. So this is a barefaced lie by both the Labour and Conservative governments. We're talking about a major offensive in Afghanistan. Now, I haven't got time to talk about Afghanistan, but I will tell you that I have no doubt that there is not a proper enemy in Afghanistan. There are people prepared to kill our troops, But if anybody tells me it's to do with Al-Qaeda and international terrorism, I regard it as complete poppycock. It is nonsense. The war has been created, and the war is about protecting poppy production. Isn't it an amazing coincidence that this offensive has been designed to occur just at the time we're heading for an election? Labour's secret plot to engineer a multicultural UK. It is in the papers. If you get today's paper, you can read the stories where the truth is coming out that the Labour Party made a conscious decision it was going to re-engineer a new society. We weren't asked, we weren't consulted, but they had a plan for a new society. Those of you who've heard previous talks by me on the subject of common purpose will have heard me saying that common purpose is all about re-engineering society. But again, they don't want most people to know what's being done. Children to spy on bad neighbours and they'll get cash rewards. What's that doing? Well, it's making people fearful, but it means that you're not even going to trust children. And this is a very, very cynical psychological technique where we're beginning to break up families. Yeah? Absolutely, 1984. But I'm sure the men in the audience will know that now if you're a male and you go somewhere, you take your children to the swimming pool, you cannot take photographs of your own children without fear of being labelled a pervert. So what's been done is trust between people has been turned on its head, almost 180 degrees. The port of Dover is to be sold to the French. Well, that's very nice of Gordon Brown. Isn't that a decision to be made in Parliament? We knew some time ago that armed police, foreign police, French police, were on British soil in the port of Dover. It was never really reported in the press, but this is a very, very dangerous precedence. We have enough problems with our own police at the moment. There are a lot of good ones, and I can see Albert's come in the back door.
Thank you, sir.
But what is happening? Children of 5 to get school questionnaires. How many of you knew this? Oh, I'm surprised. They're going to get questionnaires to fill in, and based on what a 5-year-old fills in, the results are going to be scrutinised by social services, who have already said they will intervene if they perceive there's a problem. The same system is being used in the States on older children, 12, 13, 14, and based on their answers, the government can prescribe them with drugs. If the parents complain or fight, the parents are imprisoned. Check it yourself on the internet. This is what is starting to come in to British schools, and I can tell you we were shocked to discover last week that a company called Cunningham's, if I remember that name correctly, has already installed fingerprinting systems in 600 southwest schools. Now, if you are the person thinking, well, why would they want to do that? They'd never do anything wrong. I'm going to say I'm not so trustworthy, because when I look at the people in control in this country, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking lords or politicians or people in senior civil service positions, we are finding they're less than trustworthy. But we're now fingerprinting children. And bird flu, we've got a massive stockpile of unused vaccines, but we're now pushing for people and children to be vaccinated. If anybody dares raise their hand about the dangers of these vaccines, then they're quickly dismissed as an idiot or a campaigner. But we are seeing things in the papers saying that something is not right. So